turn it into beautiful music. Today, we are going to be embarking on a series dealing with emotional balance. We're going to start off with this episode discussing the Torah's view on balance. What is the Torah's view on balance, and specifically as per emotional balance? We're then going to proceed to discuss how do I know if I'm not emotionally balanced, and what happens when we don't have emotional balance. And maybe we'll end off with a nice thought that kind of doesn't leave us hanging in the air. All right, so let's start. First of all, what is the Torah's view on balance in general? So we have two tablets, right? We have the tablets that are Ben Adam LaMakom, between us and God, that deal with believing in God. God took us out of Egypt, Shabbat, and so on and so forth. And then we have another tablet, another 5 commandments that deal exclusively between us and man. So what happens if someone decides to only tend to the tablets that are between him and God? He totally totally doesn't pay attention to his relationship between him and his fellow man, right? He's so spiritual, he's so holy, but he's not paying attention to the fact that he might be talking Lashon Hara, he might be hurting somebody's feelings, and so on and so forth. That's not right. What about the opposite? If somebody is totally tending to what is going on between him and his fellow man, he's very considerate, he's very caring, he's nice to animals, he's nice to society, but he has no relationship with God, the higher being, the creator, and so on. So that's also not a sense of balance. The balance is when the person is able to combine the two. He has his relationship with God, he has his relationship with the being, the creator of the universe, and he also has his relationship with man. He uses the tools that God placed into motion to be able to create that balance, but balance nonetheless. Additionally, we have Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Each one of our forefathers had a different representation. Abraham was unbridled chesed, was unbridled giving, meaning giving and with no boundaries with it. Yitzchak, his son, was unbridled judgment, gevurah, judgment, right? Now, God didn't choose to start the tribes and the Jewish people from them. He chose to start it from Yaakov. Why? Because Yaakov represented Tiferet. Because he was the balance between unbridled giving and mercy and unbridled and gevurah, judgment. To find that, you have to be in the middle. In order to start a family, a community, a movement, you can't be too much merciful, you can't be too judgmental. You have to be in the middle. You have to be accepting of people and yet know how to put the people that you're leading in the right position. Balance. Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, represented the idea of balance. From him started the tribes, his children. Why? Because the Torah is telling us you want to build something that's going to be everlasting, it has to be in the middle. We'll get to the Rambam, but there's a reason things are called too much. There can be too much of everything. Too much good. You shower someone with too much good, they kind of resent it after a while, right? Too much bad, obviously. You understand what that is. Now, the Torah says in Tehillim, Mi ale behar Hashem u'mi yakum bimkom kodsho. Who will climb the mountain of God and who's going to remain standing? Why? Because there's 2 stages in life. There's a stage in life when we're climbing, you're exploring, you're discovering, but that denotes and that has a certain level of unstableness, instability. Our job in life is not to constantly be changing. In fact, when I teach my classes, I teach my students, I got this from my father, God bless him, the word change denotes instability, growth, evolution, evolving, moving forward. That is the idea. Right? Who's going to remain standing in the mountain of God? Because we need to find that place in our life where we stand. We're always moving forward. We're always evolving. We're always adapting. We're always growing, reaching new heights. But the instability part, the unstable part, is what we kind of want to avoid. Now, one of the strongest places to see the Torah's perspective of balance is from the Rambam. The Rambam writes in Hilchot Teshuvah, chapter 3, Halakha 4. He writes like this. He says, one should see the world and oneself as if he's standing on a scale with equal balance of good and evil. When he does one good deed, the scale is tipped to the good. He's tipped to the good, and the world is tipped to the good. When he does one evil deed, the scale is tipped to bad, and the world is tipped to bad. He writes this. Rambam writes this also famously in Shmone Prakim. He uses the famous lashon Haderech HaEmtzai, right? Aristotle discussed this, the idea of finding yourself in the middle. It's the name that the Rambam coined as, the golden path, the straight path, the middle path. What is that? The path of the king. In the Hebrew, it's called Derech HaMelech, right? Why is it called the middle path? Because the Rambam is teaching us something very important. If I want to motivate someone in Elul, or I want to motivate someone to change, I would tell them the opposite. I would say, you should see yourself as if you're always on the bad side. You're always on the negative side. Push yourself as much as you can, right? Don't just, do a little bit. No, I want to motivate you to be great. Then I want you to see yourself as if you're constantly on the challenge side. But why doesn't the Rambam give that? He says, no, you see yourself on a scale, like a seesaw. Remember as kids, we had seesaws? You're sitting and you want to tip it a little bit. You just put a little bit of weight on one side or a little bit of weight on the other side. And that's enough. Parents stand there, put their foot on the seesaw, and they can manage it. Why should we see ourselves that way? Because the Rambam is teaching us something about growth, and the Rambam is teaching us something about emotional balance. Our lives should not be full of extremes. Our lives should be full of small steps. See yourself as if one small action to the good is going to change and evolve everything about you. See yourself as if one small action of bad is already negative. Don't look to make the extreme choices. Don't look to make the extreme changes. If someone's in a situation, God forbid, where they're in an extreme situations demand extreme measures. But we shouldn't live that way. We shouldn't live in a situation, in a predicament where our life is constantly volcanic, where our lives are constantly changing, where things are never stable. It's like, you're flipping an omelet. My father, Sheikh, always says, like, you're flipping an omelet. That's not stable. That's not what the Rambam says. Look at I need to take a small step forward. I need to take a small positive action, and that's what I need to do. To sum it up quite simply, when the Rambam wants to teach us how we should grow in the laws of Teshuvah, how we should change, he uses an example that really brings out the idea of subtlety. You're always standing in the middle. All you need to do is a small action of positive. All you need to do is a small action of negative. Be careful of the small action of negative and look for the small action of positive. This doesn't bring us to the path of underachieving. No, this is the way to achieve. And then when we're talking about in our session today about emotional balance, emotional stability, we need to get to that point where, yes, we have our small bad days and we have our great days, but our great days shouldn't be ecstatic and our bad days are to the opposite. No, we're looking for emotional stability. We'll find that joy. We'll find those moments of tranquility and peace and happiness, and they shouldn't be, volcanic. That denotes instability. Furthermore, another step, it brings down in Mishnah and Pirkei Avot. Perek Mishnah Yute. Ma ben talmidav shel Avraham Avinu letalmidav shel Bilam Harasha. What's the difference between the students of Avraham and the students of Bilam? Bilam was an evil sorcerer. Now, if I would be writing this Mishnah, which was one of the reasons I wasn't chosen to write it, I would have written, what's the difference between Abraham, and Bilam? What does it mean? What's the difference between the students of Abraham and the students of Bilam? No. What's the difference between Abraham and Bilam? Not his students. The answer is like this. When you looked at Abraham and Bilam, what did you see? You looked at Abraham, he had these long peot, his big, long beard, black hat, whatever kippah you want to put on his head. He had 2 tefillin, he had You looked at Bilam, you know what? The same exact thing. He looked exactly like a tzaddik. Everything that in your mind, whatever is a tzaddik for you, is what Bilam looked like. You couldn't tell the difference. How could you tell the difference, says Pirkei Avot? Not in the person himself, in the movement that they're creating. What's the difference between the students of Abraham and the students of Bilam? One is creating unstable people. One is creating servants of God that are stable, that are healthy, that are moving forward, that are growing in a positive way. Where are the students going? Not at the leaders. The leaders are sometimes very hard to tell a difference between. They all sound great. And they all sound charismatic. What are their movements producing? Are they producing emotionally balanced, healthy, integrated, successful people that are using their every moment for the service of Hashem? That's the leader we want to follow. That's the leader we want to follow. Again, it's about finding our place and balance. Now, the Rambam here, we spoke about the idea of finding emotional balance, and how do you do that? It's okay to have a little bit of a bad day. It's okay to have a great day, right? But they're not all over the place. He also discusses the value of the smallest action, and that we shouldn't live in the world of drama. If you see that and this is why I brought the Mishnah of the difference between the students of Abraham and the students of Bilam. If you see that your lifestyle is creating a lot of drama, you got to look at the source. It's something in the way you're thinking. It's something in the way you're living your life that's creating all of that drama. There's something in the source, the root. That's what the Mishnah was telling us. It was telling us the idea that the outcome, right, it proves what is going up on top. Was the up top, was my assumption correct? Now, what happens when we don't have emotional balance? What happens? So the lack of emotional balance could show up in a few ways. Number one is it shows up physically. Conventional science tells us that if you have a backache, you take a pill and the backache feels better. But when we study a little bit deeper, we understand that our emotions are affecting our physical being. Meaning, instead of conventional science just being like going outward in, we need to understand that the real source of it is inward out. So, for example, when you're agitated, when you're nervous, when you're upset, you hear a lot of people saying, I can't eat. Why can't you eat? What does that have to do with anything? Because my emotions are not letting me, right? Our body is the same way. When we have a certain sense of emotional tranquility, our body feels good as well. If we don't have that and we have emotional toxicity, then what happens? That's compounded and our body will show it either in insomnia, hostility, anger, fear, anxiety. You'll feel the actual pain. When we don't deal with our emotions head on, they come out. They come out. They have to come out. Every energy, everything that we create has to come out. So one thing is lack of emotional balance shows up physically. Number two, it turns inward and leads toward depression. As a further complication, if you don't know how to deal with your feelings of anger and fear, anxiety, then what happens is you turn them inward on yourself. You say, oh, it's my fault. You suppress them. The guilt depletes our physical and emotional being. Okay, we feel exhausted. And that could lead towards depression. We've spoken in the past about the idea of depression is there's nothing wrong with feeling sad. There's something wrong with being in the tunnel and sitting down. That's what depression kind of does. Number three is that all that noise in our mind, and refer back to our sessions before and our classes beforehand, is confusing. When we have all this noise going on, we can't hear the blessing. We can't hear our next step. We have a sense of non-judgment. So when we get to a harmonious place, our creativity comes out. Positive outcomes comes out. But if we're emotionally turbulent, we're too agitated to access any of that. So again, when we don't have emotional balance, there's so much noise. Things that should be clear and easy to digest are just so far. So what are the two options for emotional balance? Well, being out of balance emotionally involves one of two options. Either you're not allowing yourself to experience your feelings as they evolve by avoiding or suppressing them. So that's suppression. you're pushing everything down, or the opposite, you're so attached to and you're identified with your emotions that your feelings are all consuming. You're basically being taken over in totality by your emotions. So you're either suppressing them and you're cold as ice, or they're so powerful that there's a volcano and there's nothing, it's consuming you. Okay, emotional balance occurs when we allow ourselves to feel whatever comes up, because feeling that sense of pain is normal without feeling stifled or overwhelmed, and we learn to accept our feelings without judgment. That's emotional balance, is to feel it, but to know how to deal with it. What would the Torah's perspective be on the idea of feeling emotions? Okay, we have this picture of our tzaddikim that they never felt emotions, they never felt challenge. We read stories in Chumash and Tanakh about their perfection and their prophecy and so on and so forth. And we hear stories growing up about righteous people that they, kind of above and beyond any level of grasp. But let's bring two examples of where the Torah exposes how our tzaddikim felt. One is by Avraham Avinu, when Avraham Avinu was performing the Akedat Yitzchak, sacrificing his son. So it says, Atay adati ki yareh Elokim atah. He didn't go through with it because Hashem stopped him. God stopped him. And God says, now I know that you fear me. Why fear me? It should say, now I know that you love me. He was ready to give it all, really to give it all up. No, because there are certain things that you can't do with love. This was a height that could not be reached with love. It was a humanistic side that Avram was ready to perform Akedat Yitzchak, but with fear. Meaning their emotions were able to be sensed and go through the challenge and react to the challenge as we would react. Obviously, their level was way beyond anything we can comprehend. But for their level, it was still done in Iraq. Another situation was Aaron. Aaron had a tragedy with his children, and what does it say his reaction was? Vayidom Aaron. Aaron kept quiet. It doesn't say he was happy, right? It says Vayidom. He remained silent. That was the height of Aaron. Why? There's certain situations where the Torah doesn't say, hey, we expect you to just dance and sing and be happy and so on. No. Accept it. We know that it's a challenge for you. Accept it. Don't complain. Don't be bitter. The level you need to reach is to be able to accept it. Right? So, that gives us an understanding that experiencing that seesaw that the Rambam was talking about, where a little bit positive, a little bit negative, is also part of what we call life. Okay, now let's discuss how we can kind of discover on ourselves if we do experience a lack of emotional balance. We'll give some examples. Number one is you get stressed easily. Okay? You get stressed easily, getting stressed easily. Number two is you have a difficulty asserting yourself. Why is this so? Because you can't really, show a sense of balance. Number three, you have a limited emotional vocabulary. When you don't have a clear understanding of your emotions, if your emotions are misunderstood to yourself, then that'll lead to irrational choices and counterproductive actions. And you're limited. You can't express yourself because you have a problem with it. Number four is you make assumptions quickly and defend them vehemently, right? Something transpires, you kind of gather the evidence right away and you stick to it. Number five, you hold grudges. Holding on to a grudge means you're holding on to stress and so on. So that's not a balance. You've gone through something. We have to learn how to be able to let go of it, which is the next case of you don't let go of mistakes. When you dwell too much on mistakes, when you dwell too much on things you've done wrong, that obviously creates a sense of anxiety for you. Number seven is you feel misunderstood, which is we touched on it a little when it comes to emotional vocabulary. But when you feel misunderstood, it's because you can't deliver your message to others. Why can't you deliver it to others? A lot of times it's because you don't understand it within yourself. Okay, number eight, you don't know your triggers. what triggers you to behave in certain ways. Number 9 is you don't get angry. This is the other side. Sometimes when you don't get angry, there's, like Vaidom Haron, the Torah understands, hey, you could get upset in this situation. What you do with it is another thing. I was giving a class about, educating our kids. Whenever the message to your kids is, how could you have hurt my feelings? That's wrong. But whenever it's, hey, what you did was wrong, that's okay. So in the same thing, like when you're not getting angry in a situation that you could get angry in, what you do with it and how you express it is another thing. That's also an emotional imbalance. Number 10, you blame other people for how they make you feel. You're not really able to take responsibility. And number 11 is you easily feel offended. One of these appearing within us in an extreme fashion. One of these 11 appearing within us is a form of lack of emotional balance. Okay, so you're still here. I'll tell you what we're going to do. As a small little step forward, I'm going to perform with you a meditation. I'll mind the time. It's a short meditation of only a minute and a half, and I want you to sit in a comfortable place, monitor your breathing, close your eyes, open your palms, and think about the following. With God by my side, I give my mind and body full permission to feel emotionally balanced. Again, whenever your thinking shifts astray, create that bubble in your mind, that thought in your mind of, with God by my side, I give my mind and body permission to feel emotionally balanced. I'll mind the time. Thank you for joining, and until next time, let's turn the noise in our life into beautiful, sweet music.